Hi there. Hello all and welcome back to the Freshwell Low Carb Lifestyle Programme, as you know, in conjunction with the Colne Valley Primary Care Network. So just start with a very quick disclaimer that this is not medical advice and you should always check with your own healthcare provider before starting any major lifestyle and dietary changes. And this is particularly true if you're on any regular medications for type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure or other chronic long-term conditions. Whenever possible, try and monitor blood sugars and blood pressures at home if you have access to this. So today we're going to do module 5, and this module is entitled Physical Activity, Stress, Sleep and Nature. So let's think about stress. Stress in the ancient world. There has always been stress. There's no way of getting away from it. And actually, it's a pretty important thing for our body to be able to manage. In the ancient world, you could think about cavemen and the woolly mammoths, but having to fight animals for survival, having to catch animals. It's very, very important that we have that hormone. Cortisol is a hormone that is released from our adrenal glands, which are the glands that sit just above our kidneys. And our body produces extra cortisol when it needs to deal with stress. This is also known as the fight or flight response. So think, a situation where you've been frightened by something or you've needed to run, it is cortisol helping that happen. And cortisol is an essential hormone for our survival. And we need to produce more when we have been traumatized, when we have infections on board, when we've had operations. Our body needs to produce more to help us deal with that stressful situation. So fight or flight mode, as we talked about, is a function served by the sympathetic nervous system. The way that it works is that it increases our heart rate and our blood pressure. Our pupils dilate to allow us to see the risks more clearly. It opens our airways to allow us to get more air in so that we could run faster. It releases energy from our muscles to give us that explosive activity. And it also reduces other processes going on in our body that are not useful for such a moment in time, such as digestion. Digestion stops whilst our body deals with the imminent danger or stress. And also, as you can imagine, we need to release sugar from our liver and our muscles to allow us again to get that fight flight mode. We need the sugar to be able to do that. Also makes us feel quite anxious if a lot of you are in stressful situations. As you know, your heart beats a bit faster, you feel a little bit shaky. It can make you feel quite unpleasant. So the modern world can be a pretty stressful place. We are working long hours. There's a lot of societal pressure. We're working around children. There's a lot on people's plates these days. There's constant stress from all angles, both at home and at work. And this stress is often very, very counterproductive, as actually it causes negative associations such as lethargy, feeling tired all the time, never feeling refreshed, constantly feeling hungry. We don't sleep well, and that has knock-on effects on our mood, can cause anxiety and depression, and eventually burnout. And also, as we talked about before, your blood pressure can naturally start to rise when you have more stress and more cortisol on board. So let's try and look at this visually, how cortisol and insulin interact with each other during stress. It's a vicious cycle. So first of all, when we're under stress, our adrenal glands, as we talk about, just keep pumping out more and more cortisol to deal with the stress. This leads to fatigue, hunger, poor sleep. As well as that, the cortisol levels cause our sugar levels to rise. The longer this goes on, the more this makes stress worse. We're more hungry, we're more tired, and we're feeling more and more unwell with that. And because of that, we're more stressed our adrenal glands keep producing more cortisol. As your sugar levels go up, as we know, the pancreas then needs to produce more insulin to deal with that sugar. And then what we do is then store all that sugar as fat. Our blood sugar levels will drop because of the increased insulin. And as we know, then that makes us feel hungry and it makes us crave for sugar. And before we know it, we're reaching for a packet of biscuits. And therefore our sugar levels rise. So as you can see, the two tie in quite closely together in kind of two vicious cycles running alongside. And, you know, we can get ourselves into quite a pickle. So let's look at the physical long-term effects of cortisol. And I think actually if we think about it and we think about times where we've known people that have been prescribed steroid medication, cortisol is a type of steroid. People fear when they're put on steroids that their face will get fat or that they will gain weight. So for sure, in terms of the long-term effects of cortisol, weight gain is a real problem, as is insulin resistance. As we saw in the vicious cycle before, our insulin levels go up to deal with higher levels of sugar, and then that makes our body less sensitive to the effects of insulin long term, which just causes the levels to continue to rise. Muscle and bone mass is affected and is reduced, and there is also reduced production of other hormones which are important for our body functions. And as we talked about earlier again, hypertension, raised blood pressure, is a side effect of long-term cortisol exposure. So how do we manage stress? There's good evidence to show that by being active and by exercising, we can help to keep our stress levels low. Try and take control of situations. If you know that you're going to be entering into a stressful situation, talk yourself through it beforehand, know how that you might be able to manage that situation to keep your levels of stress as low as possible. Again, a lot of good evidence shows that human beings need to be interacting with others and connecting with other people to help manage their stress levels. It's also important to have me time, have time where you are doing something purely for yourself, and that doesn't include things like housework, time to take off, to go and listen to some music, or to do a puzzle, or to read a book. Maybe set yourself a challenge, say, well, on Mondays and Thursdays, I'm going to sit in my comfy chair and read for half an hour at a time, or that you're going to finish a book by a certain amount of time, or you're going to go out for a nice walk. Whenever possible, if you can, avoid alcohol, avoid smoking, and avoid too much caffeine, as you'd find in tea or coffee. Evidence also shows that as sociable creatures that we are, we also get a lot of stress reduction from helping and supporting others. So get out into your community, help other people whenever you can. Breathing exercises are also really important, and there's a lot of information on that on YouTube videos if you're not sure how to get started. Meditation, apps for mindfulness, these are all things that can help slow our breathing and help us regulate it. And in general, try to focus on the things you can control. Often stress for people comes from things that are out of their control, but although it's hard to stop that, really there's not any benefit to that. So try to focus on things you can make a difference to. So as a GP, what would we want to prescribe for stress in an ideal situation? 15 minutes a day of you time, regular exercise, a daily walk, mindfulness, such as using the Headspace app, breathing exercises, meditation to clear your head, and a good night's sleep. So that brings us on to sleep, and sleep is another extremely important function of our bodies that helps to regulate our weight. And if sleep does not serve an absolutely vital function, then it is the biggest mistake the evolutionary process has ever made. All animals, all types of animals in all walks of life need to sleep on a regular basis to be able to function well. So sleep is really the ultimate reset. It's whilst we are sleeping that our body repairs itself, the bones, the muscles, the skin, the heart. It's this point where our brain is able to file memories away, and also time for us to organise our thoughts. There are also hormones produced at night. We have a hormone called melatonin that's released from a gland in our brain that makes us sleepy as it starts to get dark. And there is a hormone called growth hormone that is produced whilst we're sleeping, and that basically helps to repair our body and promote growth. So what are the problems if we're not getting enough sleep? There is a hormone known as leptin, which is a hormone that is reduced from fat cells, and this hormone affects our food intake and our appetite and controls our energy expenditure, and ultimately it's the hormone that helps us feel full. There is another hormone called ghrelin, which is a hormone that is secreted from the stomach, again, that stimulates appetite, that makes us feel hungry. As we talked about before, the less sleep we have, the higher our cortisol levels, the more insulin resistance we have, getting us back into that vicious cycle. We get increased inflammation throughout the body, and we get more fat storage. So really, when you think about it, there's really no wonder that we make poor food choices and gain weight when we are tired. And I think most of us would agree that if we've had a bad night's sleep, it's much easier to reach for the naughty foods because we feel like we need it. So, sleep deprivation, what are the problems? So this is the term used when we're just not getting enough sleep long term. But the body still has to function the following day. Even if you have a bad night's sleep, you still have to get up. You still need to drop the children off at school. You still need to go to work and get through the day. But your body hasn't had adequate sleep to allow it to prepare for the next day. So how do our bodies cope with this? And again, we come back to cortisol. Our body needs to help us. We're too tired, we're going to struggle, but we have to get through it. So it starts pumping out more and more cortisol, this stress hormone, from our adrenal glands. So how is cortisol going to help us get through the following day? It's going to keep us moving, it's going to keep us talking, and it's going to help keep us awake to get the jobs done that we need to. However, as we've seen, cortisol is also going to make us put on weight by pushing up our insulin levels. So, in one study, it showed that being sleep deprived for a time period of around 2 weeks, they took 2 groups of people, and the people who were under the sleep deprivation gained on average 3 pounds, about 1.5 kilos, despite having the same food intake and doing the same exercise. There's also evidence that patients that have had weight loss surgery, such as bariatric surgery, when they are sleep deprived, they regain the weight that they lose after their initial surgery. So, as GPs, what would we suggest on prescription for your sleep? Make sure you're getting enough. Studies seem to suggest that 8 hours is the optimum amount of sleep that we should aim for every night. But really, I would say somewhere between 7 to 8 hours. Try not to make that less than 7 hours. Make sure you're exposing yourself to sunlight every day. This resets your body's sleep-wake cycle, helps to produce the melatonin that's so important for getting us off to sleep as the sun starts to go down. Maybe take yourself out for an early morning walk to really get your day off to a good start. Try to minimise the amount of alcohol you're drinking, particularly in the 4 hours before you go to bed. I think we would all potentially recognise that drinking alcohol initially makes us feel quite tired and might help us to get off to sleep earlier, but generally when that alcohol wears off, we find ourselves waking up very early and then struggling to get back to sleep again. Aim not to have caffeine in tea or coffee past midday if possible. And try not to eat too late in the evening, preferably aiming to have your evening meal a minimum of 2 hours before you go to bed. And also don't exercise too late in the evening, as again, this is going to push up our adrenaline and cortisol levels and make it much harder to drop off. We all tend to get quite a lot of screen time these days, and I think it's important to know that the blue light that comes off screens like a mobile phone, like an iPad or a laptop, is definitely detrimental to our sleep. So whenever you can, try to avoid that type of screen time for at least an hour and a half before you're planning to go to bed. Don't take your phone to bedroom. It's too tempting to pick up and just flick through Facebook or have a look at your messages. It's not important. Your sleep is important. Leave your phone downstairs. You can deal with it in the morning. Try and set yourself a regular bedtime. Try to aim for around the same time every evening and have a good bedtime routine. And that might also include setting your alarm and getting up at the same time every morning. Some people find that a warm shower or bath before they go to bed starts them feeling sleepy. And do keep your bedroom cool. Turn the radiator down, open the window slightly. We don't sleep as well if it's too warm. And make the environment as restful as you can. Try to make the room dark, maybe by using blackout blinds or an eye patch, and minimise the sound around you if you're able. So now we've learned how important sleep is to us as humans, and it really is important for you to try and make sleep a priority. Do you get a good night's sleep? Are you going to bed early enough? Do you sleep well? Are you waking up refreshed? And I think a lot of us probably need to ensure that we go to bed early enough to give ourselves a chance to get that 7 to 8 hours in every night. Maybe that could be a challenge, trying to go to bed half an hour earlier than you would normally. So now let's move on to exercise. I think the adage, you can't outrun a bad diet, is a really, really important one. And again, studies show that really our weight is controlled by around 90% of what we are eating, and 5 to 10% is exercise. I also find with a lot of patients that they'll go to the gym, they'll do a workout, they'll go for a little run, and then almost to congratulate themselves when they get in, they'll have something maybe a little bit naughty that they wouldn't have anyway, because they feel that they've done the work to be able to give themselves that prize. So definitely remember, you can't outrun a bad diet. This is not a bad plan. This is not a good plan. Concentrate on your diet first and then start working on your exercise. Exercise can be beneficial in many ways. And I think sometimes when we talk about exercise, people think they need to go to the gym. And no, that isn't everybody's cup of tea. And you don't need to be going to the gym paying out fees. The most important thing really is that it's something that you enjoy, because if it's something you enjoy, you're going to find it much easier to do, much easier to keep up. And that might just be going for a walk out in the countryside out of your own front door. It might be going to the gym. It might be playing football at the weekends. It might be going out for a nice cycle ride. There are multiple ways to do this, but try when you can to be active every day. If you struggle for motivation, there are so many online video workouts now on YouTube, things that are free, so you don't even need to pay any sort of subscription charge. There's free activity for people to do. I think that's one very positive thing that has come out of lockdown, is that all this stuff is now available for free and it's out there for you. There is a doctor known as Dr. Chatterjee, who is the BBC One Doctor in the House series doctor, and as part of the work that he's done on lifestyle promotion, he does something called a 5-minute kitchen workout, and it's just basic squats and crunches and things that you can do in your kitchen in 5 minutes. So maybe you could plan to do that every day for 5 minutes and see how you get on. And really, again, just remember, do not think of exercise as a way of earning food. Don't think, well, I've done that, so now I can eat that, because you're just on a hiding to nothing. It's going back to that old calories in, calories out model, which we know from earlier modules just doesn't work. It doesn't add up. So movement, other ways that it benefits us. We know that it increases our sensitivity to insulin and therefore lowers our insulin resistance. Because we're more sensitive to the effects of insulin, our blood sugar goes down. We know that exercise leads to a reduced risk of Alzheimer's dementia and also the risk of many cancers. And indeed, movement also secretes another hormone called serotonin, which is our good feeling hormone, and therefore leads to less anxiety and depression and improved mental well-being. And there is also a lot of evidence to suggest that getting regular exercise reduces our risk of heart attacks and strokes, and weight-bearing exercise reduces our risk of osteoporosis or bone thinning. So this chart just again demonstrates those benefits of physical activity. All mortality is reduced by 30%. Cardiovascular disease reduced by up to 35%. Type 2 diabetes reduced by up to 40%. Colon cancers and breast cancers by 30% and 20%. And depression by up to 30% also. And hip fractures are reduced by almost 70%, which I think we'd all agree is a pretty big number. So how much physical activity should you do? And there are a lot of differing opinions out there, but in general, as GPs, we recommend that people, adults, aim for at least 150 minutes, which is around 2.5 hours a week, of moderate intensity activity in bouts of 10 minutes or more on a weekly basis. If you prefer higher intensity activity, this amount of time can be halved to around 75 minutes stretched across the week. There's also strong recommendations that all adults should undertake muscle strengthening activities, which comes from using weights, practicing yoga, and also, carrying heavy shopping if you want to fit it into your daily routine. And you should try to get that muscle strengthening activity around 2 days a week. And also minimise the amount of time that you're spent sitting down for extended periods of time. A lot of people now that have Fitbits or wear Apple Watches, a lot of them have modes on that basically set off a little alarm when you've been sat still for too long, and they encourage you to get up and move about. So if you do wear a Fitbit, see if you can check out that option. And people might ask, well, what counts as moderate physical activity? And I would generally say that any activity is better than none. Walking, just instead of taking the bus, why not walk? Or get off the bus a couple of stops early. That all helps. Gardening, getting out there, doing some planting, weeding, that's going to count as some physical activity. More joyful things like dancing, hiking, football with our friends, cycling and swimming. They're all good things to be getting up to. So now let's move on to sunlight, which is another very important thing. Sunlight basically helps our bodies to produce a vitamin known as vitamin D. You need to get outside every day, expose your forearms to the sun, and try and soak up that vitamin D. Unfortunately, because of where we live in the UK, we know that between October and April, even if it is sunny and you are outside being exposed, that unfortunately the wavelength of light that is around at that time of year is not enough to be able to produce vitamin D. So you need to really store up in the summer, but even then you're probably going to need to supplement in the winter. We can also get vitamin D from our diet, and we can get this from oily fish such as salmon or mackerel. And we can also get amounts from red meat, liver and eggs. However, evidence suggests that we really cannot be having be eating enough to be able to get the amount of vitamin D that we need. So in general, I would suggest that people do take a dietary supplement of vitamin D. Personally, I take 2,000 units a day every day, also in the summer as well as the winter. But certainly I would suggest taking a supplement from October to April each year. And it appears that anywhere up to 5,000 units a day is safe without any risk of side effects. And taking that vitamin D is going to have huge benefits for our bones, our muscles, and our immune system. And as a lot of you are probably aware, with the recent coronavirus issues, there has been a lot of evidence to suggest that the people that suffer the worst from coronavirus and are more unwell with it also have the lowest levels of vitamin D. So again, an excellent reason to go out now and get your supplement and get started. So that's it for that module. So hopefully that's taught you a little bit on how it's so important to keep our stress levels low, get a good night's sleep, and get outside and get active. The next module is going to be our final module, which is concentrating on eating out, troubleshooting, and where to go from here. So thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.